thank you for giving me this opportunity to present a taster lecture to you guys. So as you know, the title is Sensory Marketing, Why It Matters and How to Use It. So the lecture will be will take around like 15 to 20 minutes, and at the end of the lecture I will actually set up a challenge for you to answer the question about what we will learn from today's taster lecture. Okay, so I cannot go to the next slide. I hope Rob can help me in here to go to on the next slide. Okay, perfect. So we will have 3 learning outcomes today, actually, not 4. So we will look at why sensory marketing is important in theory and practice, and we will try to understand how the concept of senses have emerged and developed in marketing discipline. So we will try to understand why traditional marketing communications are not working properly, and why do we need sensory marketing. And at last, we will try to understand why we should know the components of sensory marketing and their impact on consumer behavior. So I will have a question for you. So this is the time where you can use your chat box. Probably you might wonder why those 2 pictures are next to each other. So is there any guess where these pictures might have taken? So the first one, okay, I will give a hint about the first one. The first one was taken in Japan, in Chinkuji Ward, and the second one was taken in New York Times Square. So as you can see from those pictures, we can see logos, right? Names of the brands, banners, advertisements. So generally, all of the brands are trying to get noticed by consumers, okay? And in a world of increasing visual overload, companies, as you can see, have relied too much and far too long on visual communications to get their brands noticed, to try to sell more. Okay, so now I will try to give you a couple of facts about the visual overload and visual communication. So according to a research conducted by Martin Lindstorm in BrandSense in 2015, 83% of all brand communications are appealing to only one of our sense, which is sense of sight, which means our eyes. This is really interesting because when you realize that the sense of sight works in our brains like an initial screen, which means actually we ignore most of what we see, right? So I have just showed you 2 pictures of 2 important squares in Japan and in Times Square. And as you can see, the brands were using traditional marketing communication techniques, including the print advertisements, billboards, flyers, newspapers, so on and so forth. So we said it's not working anymore. But why? Because the effectiveness of traditional marketing is now declining. The reason is it's actually interrupting the consumers instead of offering them something valuable. Okay, and also another reason is consumers can hold attention to traditional marketing communications for a short time span. Another interesting fact for you is we are getting bombarded with over 1,700 banners ads per month, but you know, we are actually seeing half of them. So we don't actually notice them. That's why we can hold an attention for a long period of time. This is where the sensory marketing and the concept of senses kick in. So perception of consumers is their way of interpreting, understanding, and perceiving everything that involves an offering from a brand or a company. So basically, for us to gather information about a brand, a product, or a service, we need to process information by using our five senses, which are sense, hear, smell, taste, and touch. If you can see this graph, you would see the more senses associated with the brands in terms of communication, to gather information, consumers can perceive value more. So, if, for example, if a brand is associating only the sense of sight, then the perceived value of the brand or the offering will be less. So the more senses associated with the brand or product or their offering, then the perceived value will be high. So you would say, isn't it that the companies are already doing? No. If you look at this graph, you will see only 3% of Fortune 500 companies are using smell, even though 75% of our emotions are generated by what we smell. What does it mean? Basically, still, companies are trying to learn on how to implement sensory marketing and the concept of senses into their offerings, products. So I would like to give an example, an interesting example of how sensory marketing can directly impact, for example, sales, which is coming from Dunkin' Donuts campaign in Seoul, South Korea. So what they're trying to do with this campaign is, the mission was encourage people to choose coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. And what they try to do is, they try to associate more senses in their campaign. To do that, they implemented devices to the commuter buses in South Korea, which released the aroma of fresh coffee whenever Dunkin' Donut jingle played over the radio. And the striking fact is, at the end of this jingle and at the end of this aroma, the buses would stop close to a Dunkin' Donuts outlet to see the real impact of this campaign. And the campaign actually was a huge success, and sales increased during this promotion by 30%. Okay. So now I gave you lots of interesting facts and a case example. Now I would like to give you a definition of what sensory marketing is. So the sensory marketing is brands' ability to interact consumers by engaging any of the five senses to influence their emotions and perceptions, where they are trying to deliver more meaningful and memorable experiences. So we are talking about sensory marketing, but we didn't mention about the components of sensory marketing. So first and the most dominant sensory stimuli can be considered visual cues, okay, which include everything we can see. It can be color, it can be logo, it can be lighting, fixture, graphics, signage, or mannequins. So while I'm explaining the concepts, I would like to give you some interesting or unconventional examples about those components and the real practices from different brands, and I will try to explain how they implement it. For the visual cues, one of the unconventional example could be L'Occitane's digital art installation, where they're trying to aim to transport their visitors to Provence, a region in France, to experience the beauty and the sense of the area. And the outcome of this component, the implementation of this interesting visual cue into their retail store, is that the visits increased by 198% in this specific store. So actually we can see how sensory marketing can be influential in consumers' attitude and behavior, where it's actually delivering them a memorable experience. The second component of sensory marketing is audio cues. So for example, if I say to you, let's imagine Coke, we are pouring a Coke into a glass full of ice, probably the first thing you would hear would be the jingle of Coke, right? So in audio cues, It actually refers all sound-related cues, including jingles or other sounds associated with brands, which makes distinctive and memorable when we recall a brand like Coke. An interesting example about audio cues can be Häagen-Dazs's advertising campaign on Concerto Timer, where they were trying to implement audio cues by using QR codes, where customers can scan those QR codes and listen a concerto just on the lid of their ice cream. The third component is olfactory cues, where olfactory cues are stimuli related with scents and freshness in the atmosphere, just like what we have discussed about Dunkin' Donuts. Probably taste or gustatory cues are the most neglected cues from the brands, but actually it refers sensations that are elicited by stimulation of gustatory receptors on the tongue. Taste cues aren't used by brands more often, like sight or haptic cues or audio cues, but actually it also delivers a memorable experience for the consumers. An interesting example can be Ben & Jerry's implementation, where they were trying to give taste samples of ice creams, and in the meantime they allowed their consumers to see their brain waves, and they called this campaign as "This is your brain on ice cream." The last cues in sensory marketing is haptic cues, so basically the sense of touch. It's really important, especially for retail industry, where they're trying to organize their offerings, their products, because the tactile sense is considered as a primary source of input in our perceptual system. So what does it mean? We could actually gather knowledge about a product, about an offering of a brand, and it would give us, again, a memorable experience. The most prominent and influential example could be Apple's advertising campaign, A Touch of Genius, where they're trying to give a sense or an urge to their customers for them to visit their stores and try the new touch bar of MacBooks.